I hadn't missed a Sunday dinner in over 12 years. Not once. Not after late nights in the audit room. Not after blizzards that iced over the highway. Not even when I pulled 60-hour weeks just to make ends meet. My daughter Talia used to say, I made it feel like tradition mattered. It's not Sunday without you, Mom, she once whispered over a birthday candle. I held on to that longer than I should have. That evening, the sky was smeared with the soft gray blue of early dusk, and the road to Glenridge was quiet. I drove with both hands steady on the wheel, the smell of garlic and tomato sauce seeping into the air like comfort. The lasagna sat beside me in the passenger seat, still warm beneath the foil edges browned just the way Talia liked it. No ricotta, extra mozzarella basil pressed between the layers. I'd made it from scratch that morning. My back had started to ache midway through, but I'd kept going, because that's what mothers do. Their porch light was already on by the time I pulled up. Yellow, soft. It reminded me of when Talia was small and used to leave the hallway light on for me if I was working late. I parked carefully behind Wesley's SUV, avoiding the cracked section of curb out of habit. The front steps creaked faintly as I climbed them too, normal the third always a little off. I knew every inch of this house, even if it hadn't been mine in over a decade. I reached for the screen door. That's when I heard it. Don't worry. We'll make my mom cover it. She always does. It was Talia's voice. Calm, dismissive. Like she was talking about a line item in a spreadsheet. A pause, then laughter, not hers, but familiar. Darla Carrington, her mother-in-law. She still pays for your cell plan, doesn't she? Darla's voice sharp and amused. Talia laughed. Oh, you know, Mom. Guilt works every time. She'll say yes before I even finish the sentence. I didn't move. My hand hovered near the door handle. The lasagna dish in my arms grew heavier by the second. Inside, I heard the clink of glass and the rustle of papers. Wesley said the IRS gave him until the end of the quarter, Talia continued. We just need enough to show good faith. I figured we start with a story roof damage, maybe a leak. She'll offer before I ask. She's always been soft, Darla said. Bless her heart. The warmth drained from my fingers first, then my arms, then somewhere deeper, somewhere behind my ribs. I didn't move. I couldn't. The dish pressed cold into my skin, the foil beginning to crumple from my grip. Inside, my daughter kept talking, like I didn't exist, like I was already in her pocket. I didn't knock. I didn't even lift my hand from where it hovered near the screen door. I backed away one step at a time, careful not to let the third stair creak under my weight. The lasagna was still in my arms, still warm, but I felt like I was carrying stone. Once I reached the sidewalk, I didn't look back at the house. I slid into the driver's seat and placed the dish gently on the passenger side, like it was still meant for someone I loved. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Talia, probably, but I didn't check. I just sat there with both hands on the steering wheel, trying to remember when I'd stopped being her mother and become her funding strategy. The street lamps flickered on above me, lighting the road in a pale orange. I typed out a quick text. Sorry, got called into work. Last-minute review. I'll make it up to you next week. There was no guilt in the lie. Only a strange relief. I didn't wait for a response before pulling away from the curb and merging back onto the highway. The lasagna smelled like home. Garlic and tomato, the kind of scent that clung to your skin and your memories. I had made this same dish for her 8th grade graduation when she cried because her best friend moved away. I made it the night before she left for college, slipping a handwritten note into her suitcase that she didn't mention until years later. I made it when she came back from her honeymoon and looked tired in a way I didn't understand at the time. There was a time I would have given anything to see her smile. And I did. I sold my wedding jewelry, gold bangles from my grandmother, the earrings Frank gave me the year we bought our first house, so she wouldn't graduate with debt. When Wesley's family said they could only afford a modest reception, I covered the shortfall, wrote the check without a second thought. When they needed help with their first down payment, I emptied my bonus from the firm every cent, because a good start mattered. I called it love. No one corrected me. They never said thank you. But I thought that was okay. You don't raise a child for the thank yous. You do it because you believe in who they're becoming. I took a long, slow turn onto my street, the quiet rows of townhouses rising like shadows on either side. My apartment lights were off. I left them that way. I parked, grabbed my keys, and left the lasagna behind. Inside, I stood in the dark for a long time, coat still on shoes, still wet from the pavement. I didn't cry. I just stood there, holding everything that had been taken and realizing how long I'd been giving it away. At some point, I opened the fridge not for food, but for something to do. The silence pressed in. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and whispered into the dark. When did my love become their entitlement? I didn't cry. That surprised me. I went to bed with the lights off and the lasagna still in the car. My hands were cold, my shoulders aching, but there were no tears, just the quiet hum of clarity, like something had finally clicked into place. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the familiar outline of shadows from the streetlight tracing across the walls, and I thought not about betrayal, not even about heartbreak, but about access. By sunrise, I had my laptop open. I logged into every account, checking savings retirement brokerage. Talia's name was still there, tucked quietly into the emergency contact forms, the secondary beneficiaries, the forgotten boxes checked out of trust, not caution. I unchecked everyone. I moved every cent into new banks, opened fresh accounts with long, forgettable passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, changed the answers to security questions I hadn't updated since before Talia graduated high school. I called my credit card company, my bank, my insurance provider, one by one, and placed fraud alerts on everything I owned. I deleted the shared Dropbox folder where I'd once uploaded our family budget, the emergency contact sheet, the passwords to the joint Netflix and Costco accounts. I wiped her from my digital world, not out of anger, but because for the first time, I realized how dangerous I had allowed my trust to become. That afternoon, I stood outside Yvette Sinclair's office. She was typing, glasses low on her nose, her blazer sharp as ever. "You have 5, I asked. She looked up and motioned me in without a word. I closed the door behind me and sat down. My voice came steady, practiced. "This isn't legal yet," I said. "It's personal, but it might turn into both." Yvette stopped typing. She turned her chair toward me, arms folded. I told her everything. The conversation on the porch, the money I'd given over the years, the lasagna I never delivered. Her face didn't flinch. Only her fingers moved, folded tighter beneath her elbows. When I was finished, she nodded once. "You've always been sharper than you let on." I didn't respond. "There's an opening in Seattle," she said. "Regional finance coordinator. Same work, higher pay. No shared zip code." I blinked. She continued. "The team's solid. Apartment assistants relocation covered. They need someone with stability. Someone invisible but essential. Like you." I wasn't sure what to say. "You'd have to decide quickly," she added. "But I don't think staying here is doing you any favors." There was no threat in her voice, only honesty. I nodded slowly. My mind had already started repacking. Not my sweaters or books, but the pieces of myself I had left in too many kitchens, too many texts, too many unguarded moments with a daughter who had memorized how to hurt me. That night, I transferred the last account, the one I'd opened the day Talia was born, back when everything I owned had her name on it. I closed it with a click and watched the screen return to blank. In the silence, I wondered what it meant to be a mother with nothing left to give. Talia called the next evening like nothing had happened. Her voice was bright, polished, a little too eager, like the way she used to sound before asking for concert tickets or weekend cash. Hi, Mom. I was thinking maybe we could grab dinner tomorrow night. Just the two of us. Catch up a little. I stared at my phone for a second before pressing it to my ear. I can't, I said steady. I have something more important than family tomorrow. There was a pause. Just a breath, but I heard it. The shift. Oh, she said lightly. Well, okay. Maybe later in the week. There's just a few things we should talk about. Nothing big, just plans. Plans, I repeated. She laughed nervously. Yeah, you know taxes are coming up and Wesley's trying to sort out that thing with the quarterly reports, and we just thought, well, we'd really appreciate your guidance. That's all. I let her speak. I listened to the rehearsed hesitation, the gentle way she folded requests into casual tones, the way she never actually said the word help. It was always implied, always softened. I didn't soften. You said I'd melt when you cry, I said flatly. Try me. There was silence on the line. Not shocked silence. Calculating. I knew that quiet well. It was the sound of her reworking her angle. I don't know what you're talking about, she finally said. You do, I answered. You just didn't expect me to hear it. She tried again. Mom, this isn't fair. You're acting like I don't care about you, like I'm using you. You are, I said, and you have been for years. That's not true. You told her I'd cover it, that I always do. You said it like I was an ATM with a casserole dish. You're twisting things I hung up. 15 minutes later, Darla called. I let it ring twice before answering. Celeste, she said too warmly. I think there's been a little misunderstanding. Talia's just under pressure, you know how it is. Weddings, mortgages, taxes. It gets overwhelming. I'm not confused, Darla. Well, she sighed, switching tones. This is just how family works. We help each other. You've always been the reliable one, and I think that's a beautiful thing. I felt my jaw tighten. I'm not your bank, I said. I'm her mother. And she stopped being my daughter the moment she started planning my generosity behind my back. Darla tried to respond, but I was already ending the call. That night I didn't turn on the TV. I sat by the window watching my reflection disappear into the evening. Something inside me had gone very still, something that used to bend and bend and bend until it cracked without sound. This time, I heard the break. The envelope was thick, unmarked, the kind that didn't belong in an office like mine. The receptionist looked apologetic as she handed it over. He said it was personal, wouldn't leave until I signed. I took it back to my desk, closed the door, and sat down without removing my coat. The weight of it in my hands felt disproportionate. Heavy like shame, but not mine. Inside, formal language, legal formatting absurdity typed in 12-point Times New Roman. Talia and Wesley were suing me. They claimed the money I'd given them over the years, college tuition, the wedding checks, the down payment gift. The emergency transfers were all verbal loans made with the expectation of repayment. They accused me of abandonment, emotional distress, financial sabotage. There was even a line that said my sudden withdrawal of familial support had destabilized their household income. For a moment, I could only laugh. Not the kind that comes from humor, but the kind that slips out when your disbelief reaches its ceiling. I laughed because I couldn't cry, not anymore. I brought the documents to Yvette. She skimmed them with a practiced eye, her expression unreadable, until she exhaled through her nose and set them on her desk. I know someone, she said. She's not cheap, but she's surgical. You need that. That same afternoon I met Gwen Locke, lean, no nonsense, with the posture of a woman who'd spent her life unafraid of confrontation. She didn't ask questions right away. She let me explain everything first. The gifts, the dinners, the overheard conversation, the calls. The night I walked away from the door with lasagna and realization cooling side by side. When I finished, she tapped the envelope once and said, "They don't want your money." I looked up. "They want to control your narrative," she said. "This suit isn't about debt. It's about guilt. They're trying to force you back into the role they built for you. The generous mother. The bottomless well. What do? I asked. We defend, obviously. They have no written agreements, no contracts. You're protected. If you wanted, we could countersue for harassment, defamation, emotional distress. I shook my head before she could finish. I don't want revenge. Gwen narrowed her eyes slightly. I want distance, I said. A clean line. No return address. She nodded. Then we make this disappear. Quietly, thoroughly. I signed the documents she prepared and left her office with a strange sense of clarity. They hadn't just tried to guilt me back into compliance, they wanted to rewrite the story. Make me look like the villain in the same tale I'd written with love and sacrifice. I went home that night and gathered every photo album, every card, every saved note in Talia's looping handwriting. I placed them gently in a box, not to throw away, but to remove from sight. I didn't need reminders of the role they'd cast me in. I was already learning how to live without the script. Packing for Seattle felt different from any other kind of packing I'd done. There was no checklist, no color-coded labels or anxiety about forgetting something. I wasn't moving to start over. I was moving to stop carrying what no longer fit. I started with the hallway closet, old linens unopened, holiday candles. A stack of gift bags I kept just in case. One by one I sorted them. Some I kept, most I didn't. The guest room came next, though no guests had stayed in it for over a year. The bed was still made with the quilt Talia and I had picked out on a whim back when we used to take Saturday drives for no reason. I folded it without ceremony. In a box beneath the bed, I found a pile of unopened cards, birthday and holiday envelopes I had mailed after she and Wesley moved into their new house. I recognized my own handwriting on each one. None of them had been opened. Some were sealed so tightly it looked like they'd never even been touched. I sat on the floor with them in my lap for a long time, reading nothing, just holding the weight of effort that had gone nowhere. By late afternoon, the kitchen was the last room left. I worked my way through the cabinets, wiping shelves, discarding spices I never used. I found it tucked behind a roasting pan I rarely touched anymore, the lasagna dish. The same one from that night, heavy glass, still clean. I hadn't used it since. I picked it up, ran my fingers along the edge, and felt the memory press back against my skin. All the dinners I had baked with hope. All the nights I had believed love was something you cooked, reheated, served up with a smile. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I walked over to the trash bin, lifted the lid, and dropped the pan in with a soft thud. There was no rage in the motion, just release. I closed the lid. I was halfway through taping a moving box when my phone buzzed, a message from a number I knew by heart, but hadn't saved in months. I'm sorry. We needed help, but I know we didn't deserve it this way. I stood there a moment, rereading it. There was no attempt to undo, only a passive surrender. It didn't sting the way I thought it might. It just felt small. I typed slowly, deliberately. I hope one day you become the kind of daughter I used to believe in. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned the phone off and slid it into the pocket of a coat I wouldn't be taking with me. The air in the apartment felt lighter, like the walls had finally exhaled. I picked up another box and kept going. The apartment in Seattle was small but bright, with wide windows that opened to a view of the river and the boats that drifted like breath across the water. I chose it because it didn't remind me of anything. No shared holidays. No quiet resentments tucked into the drywall. Just clean walls, morning light, and the smell of salt air that crept in even when the windows were closed. I furnished it slowly. A soft couch, a single chair by the window, no dining table. I didn't need one. On Sundays I still baked, but the dishes were simpler. Now small things enough for one person. I didn't miss the big meals. I missed the meaning I used to tie to them. But even that was fading. I joined a book club at the corner bookstore not because I needed the structure, but because I wanted to hear people talk about things that didn't end in loss. The women there were funny, sharp, and unapologetically curious. One of them, Janice, taught me how to paddleboard. I fell twice and laughed harder than I had in years. The muscles in my face remembered how. Most days I walked by the water before work. I started earlier now remotely for the first few months while the team transitioned. Yvette checked in once or twice, always brief, always kind. "You sound clearer," she said once. I was. Then one morning, an email from Gwen. Short to the point. Wesley indicted. Talia and Darla under formal investigation. Financial misrepresentation tied to multiple accounts. Your case has been dropped. No response filed. It's over. I read the lines twice, then deleted the message. There was no satisfaction in it. Just space. Like someone had finally opened a window in a room I'd forgotten I was trapped inside. That afternoon, I walked into the bank and closed the last account I'd kept from my old life. The woman behind the desk asked if I wanted to open a new one. I did. She passed me the paperwork. Name on the account, I paused. Then I wrote it slowly, neatly. C.M. Rivers, my mother's maiden name. The name of a woman who raised me with calloused hands and a quiet fire. The name no one had taken from me. The teller smiled and slid the papers back. "Welcome to your new start," she said. That evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, the river lit gold in the last hour of sun. I thought about the word mother, how long I'd wrapped myself in it like a purpose, how hard it had been to let it mean anything other than sacrifice. I didn't stop being a mother. I just stopped being theirs. Some people love you until you say no. That's not love. That's leverage. And in the silence that followed, I realized I didn't miss the sound of their voices at all.